Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Yes, I'm on YouTube now, dropping new videos every month. So make sure you're subscribed. Also make sure you're following me on all my other socials. I'll have those linked below. Twitter, I have a new Twitter account that I have been far more active on. So make sure you're following me there. Today we got another reaction video. This time I'm gonna be reacting to me on Jubilee and specifically my 2 middle ground feminism episodes. So far I've done 2 middle grounds on Jubilee. I was on another election episode, and then you might be catching me on future episodes, but I've done 2 middle grounds where I was on the feminist side of the aisle. The first one was feminists versus men's rights activists, and then the second one was feminists versus trad wives. I'm going to be reacting to both of those, but this is going to be part 1, and I'll be reacting to the feminists versus men's rights activists in this. Just for the sake of time, otherwise the video would be way too long. Now, I'm sure most of you are familiar with Jubilee. It's a super popular channel and you've probably seen a few of these, but how these work is there's usually 4 people on each side. So 4 of us on the feminist side, 4 of us on the men's rights activist side, and then the moderator reads out a prompt. And if you agree with the prompt, you step forward, kind of have a little discussion amongst all the people that agree. And then the people that disagree come forward. And that's when you have a little discussion / debate. They heavily edit these videos. They take entire prompts out. They move things around, completely change the order, cut things kind of weird. And I hate that. I'll watch it when it's another middle ground because it's the only way I can see it, right? But when I'm on it and I know how it actually went, I'm always nervous and I don't want to watch how they cut it because I get really annoyed if they cut out things that I wish they didn't or they just chopped it weird. So I've actually never watched any of these all the way through. I've only skimmed through and watched certain clips. I'm gonna react to moments where I speak and also any explosive part of the debate or conversation, and I'll kind of let you guys know how it all was behind the scenes.
Men already have all their rights.
Guys, I feel I overthink the prompts. I would step forward. If I'm unsure, I'll step forward because you get more of a chance to talk, because you get the time to talk amongst the agreeers before the disagreeers come in.
I hate the name men's rights activists because it does imply that as if our rights are being taken away. The problem that men face is more existential.
Okay, one thing I want to say is my side, the 3 people that were on my side for this, were fucking amazing. It was literally my first time on a panel where I felt everybody was so well-spoken and articulate, and usually I always want to fight for mic time, but anytime any of them spoke, Anitza, and I still talk to them, Anitza, Awesome, Evan, Isaac, and I'm gonna actually link all their socials below because you guys should follow them, even Ariel on the other side. You guys should follow them because they're doing really great things on social media. 10 out of 10 crew we had.
They have the rights and they're the ones that dish them out to everybody else, and you're lucky if you can.
And we also need to remember men's right activism. While they do have some genuine plights, it started out as a combatant to feminism. So I feel they laid the groundwork off a very bad foundation.
No, I 100% agree. I think it's been hijacked by a lot of bad faith actors who blame women for problems that you should blame the patriarchy.
Exactly.
And it's very frustrating. I'm on this side because I think that there is genuine problems that I think need to be addressed. I'm sure we can all agree on that.
What are some of those problems?
High suicide rates. Men are 4 times as likely to, I don't know what the TikTok version of the phrase is, but 4 times more likely. I think that's something that should be talked about more.
That's something that I really want to make clear is that I think there are legitimate issues that men are facing that are important and should be talked about. Men are falling behind in education. There is a lack of male support services. They do report being more lonely and committing self-deletion at higher rates. There are legitimate disparities in criminal sentencing. I mean, we have an administration that is literally plucking men off the streets and sending them to a foreign labor camp in El Salvador right now based on their tattoos with no evidence of a crime or gang affiliation or due process. I do see that as something that an issue that is just so harrowing to me to even think about. That's something that I will never have to experience, but being a man in America, that's something that could happen to you.
I think that there's also a lot of men are very hesitant to get rid of the notions of patriarchy, whereas I've noticed a lot of women or assigned female at birth people are very willing to just throw away any notions of femininity. I think a lot of men have a lot of emotional baggage from the patriarchy that they redirect at women, and it's not fair to them, and it's also hurting us. And the problem is for some men, all they have is their notion of masculinity to the point that they cannot let it go, and they can't see anything else other than that. When the actuality is, again, gender isn't real. We're just plants with complicated emotions. When I look at people, I just see human-shaped flowers.
Plants with complicated emotions is so funny. But yeah, I do agree with this. I don't think, and I think people are going to mention it later, that they don't really, men's rights activists don't offer real solutions. And I agree, like at least the ones I've been exposed to don't do a good job at addressing any of the problems that I talked about. Their solutions seem to be more centered around demonizing women and doubling down on traditional notions of masculinity that are no longer viable in today's society and aren't healthy for men to tie their identity to, kind of like what Ariel was saying. There are some reasonable voices that do talk about this. Like I've read Richard Reeves' of Boys and Men, which I've talked about, that I think was insightful. And I'm sure there are others, but you know, part of it is just like the space I'm in, like the hate I get from the manosphere is going to be from not the best segment of like the, you know what I mean? Not the best offshoot of it. And then also what are the big voices in the male space right now, right? And those ones are not, I think, the best for men to be following.
Flowers.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I would say that a lot of these men's rights activists, they're struggling. Like you said, they have high suicide or high self-deletion, whatever we're supposed to say, rates. And the way they're coping with it, and the way that they're coping with it is by saying, okay, we're having this issue, so we need to put women back.
Exactly.
And be this, we need to take away their rights. We need this society to be the way it was, where like all the rights that were afforded to people, it was men. Men are the first people to get rights, and then other people have to, especially white men, and then everyone else has to catch up to them. And because they're struggling, they go, oh, let's turn the clock back. Number one, that's impossible. You're not going to turn the clock back. And number two, I don't think that's actually going to help the issue.
It's not going to help the issue. It'll hinder it.
I feel like I talk the fastest. Yes. Okay. Obviously, I agree with everything I just said. Turning the clock back is not possible. Like, first of all, I don't think like we should want to. And that's something that I often find people who have this like false sense of nostalgia from the past can never, a question I find they can never answer is like, what year specifically do you want to go back to? And they never want to answer that because they don't want to confront a real time period in our history, because whatever time period they pick, they know is going to have a lot of associated with it that shows that it wasn't all that rosy. And again, we can only move forward with our current conditions and our current technology, and romanticizing some like vague memory that you don't have of the past because you were likely not born at that time, you know, where women knew their place, it's just a waste of your time and energy.
Listen to what they have to say before we disagree with them.
So the other side just came in. Let me tell you what I think of everybody on their side. So Pearl is obviously like a freak. And she made the tone of this debate like way more extreme than it had to be. She was the most extreme one on her side, and there were a lot of, even her own side disagreed with her a lot. And it was unfortunate because there were times we could have been debating something substantive, and we had to like sit there and debate whether like women are like inherently evil demons, because Pearl turned it into that. Nico, the guy in the Men's Life Matters shirt, he was like the next most extreme, but he seemed really genuine. He was kind of hard to communicate with. Like, I feel like a lot of times he didn't like understand the point we were trying to make. And then obviously besides Ariel, Thomas was also a really great men's rights activist, in my opinion. He actually brought up some really great points and seemed to genuinely be there to promote the well-being of men in areas that he felt are like being ignored by greater society. And I wish we could have focused the conversation more on what he was bringing up instead of being like derailed by Pearl's psychosis. We do wish that we could have focused more on actually men's rights issues, but we couldn't because of Pearl.
Was about 3 years ago, I wanted to know why men didn't want to get married anymore. I kept hearing men say, I don't want to get married. And it kind of took me down the rabbit hole of family court. I started interviewing men that had been what's called divorce raped. And I kept finding guy after guy after guy.
Okay, case in point, divorce scraped.
That lived a couple miles from his kids and could not see them. It goes back to men should have access to their children. It's 50% their DNA. They should get 50% custody off the bat. And right now, 90% of the time, women get custody. The question was, do men have all of their rights? How can I say that they have all of their rights when I'm finding guy after guy after guy that is devastated he can't talk to his children? I had one guy who the woman got custody, and she ended up taking the kid to a different country. And now his kid doesn't speak his same language. He spent $300,000 trying to get...
Guys, we had to hear so many of these anecdotes. I was losing my mind.
get that kid back.
I want to look at women's stories as to why they don't want to get married. And I could go interview 1,000 women. You're looking for these kinds of men.
What she's discussing are individual and yes, tragic cases, and we can acknowledge that. But what we're discussing is a systemic issue. On aggregate, men and women after divorce, women see a 27% decline in the reduction of their income. They're more likely to be in poverty, and they're less likely to get remarried.
Yes, Evan. Yes, I mentioned this a lot. I've mentioned this a lot on other podcasts, but everything he said is true. And yet Pearl doesn't seem to know what a selection bias is. Like if I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to be looking for women who have been screwed over by men and then overwhelmingly talk to women who have been screwed over by men, then I'm not going to have an accurate picture of what's going on because I'm looking for a specific thing. And again, she ranted so long about individual cases of these men and couldn't understand why like these cases or the people she's talked to are not indicative and do not like map out onto greater reality. Like this is just a point that just doesn't get through to I feel like a lot of people on this side. You'll be talking about like statistics or you'll be talking about studies that have been done, and then like red pillars or people like Pearl will be like, well, I know a guy who, and it's like, no, like individual cases do not negate statistics. Right? Like you can find cases that say of pretty much anything. I can go talk to women who've dated like the worst men and find like really horrible things. Or if I were to go do a study on like, she's like, I talked to men who didn't want to get married because they had an issue with women. I could easily flip it and be like, oh, I talked to women who didn't want to get married, like who don't want to be married to men. And I could also find, and then for me to use that and make a generalization on men as a whole, I think is stupid. Okay.
I would disagree that you say misandry is not systemic. Cultural misandry is evident in a lot of the laws that neglect men. Misandry is why homeless men don't have as many shelters. It's why we don't take male victims of domestic violence as seriously. It's why men's healthcare is underfunded. And there's a psychological phenomenon called the women are wonderful effect, where society and people have less empathy for men in a general sense. Now, there may be some nuance there. There could be some negative consequences to women. But overall, we see social welfare programs and laws mostly disfavor men. And even if it's a male politician who supports that law, he's still catering to his voters. And the fact that a male politician makes a decision doesn't resurrect a 19-year-old draftee who was killed in battle. So when you say that misandry isn't a thing, I completely disagree. It's almost become fashionable. Misandry is almost a fashionable trait.
I don't think anyone on our side said that misandry isn't a thing. I think before the disagreeers came in, the sentiment that was shared amongst the like Evan and the people who agreed with the prompt was that misogyny leads to actual like far greater consequences for women, sometimes resulting in the loss of their lives, whereas misandry is just, I think there's that like line, like misandry hurts men's feelings, misogyny like can end the lives of women, and that was kind of the point they were making. Okay, so I'm going to respond to his point about women's shelters later, but like I said, he did have very specific men's issues that he was passionate about and did mention some legitimate issues where men are disadvantaged. And like what he mentioned about empathy is actually true, that people tend to view women and children with more empathy than they do men, which I think we should aim to change societally. However, I think that most of the manosphere and the popular voices in it, like I've been mentioning, make this problem worse by reinforcing stereotypes where men are supposed to be strong and endure pain and women are supposed to be weak and fragile, you know? So like it's creating the same system and creating the same like feeling in people where they're going to view women as weaker and more deserving of empathy.
I just want to add that like the reason there are women-only spaces or women-only shelters is because men are the perpetrators of most of the crime. Now, they're also the victims of a lot of the crime, which is why that's why I didn't agree with the prompt, because I think it is that sexism. Like they did touch on it and he did touch on it, that like, oh, men are supposed to never back down from a fight. I even hear things like, oh, if men should have to know how to fight. Men should have to be aggressive. And, you know, so these women-only spaces is because women, most of the crime that's done on women is from men. So it's a safer place for women when there are no men around, especially when women that are homeless or at the bottom ranks of society.
Well, I don't disagree that we need a women's only space.
So yeah, women are obviously uniquely vulnerable to violence from men and are targeted by men for certain forms of violence and abuse. So having women-only spaces are sometimes the only way to ensure safety for women, which I don't think he disagrees with, which I think he's about to say.
The women's only space. I'm just saying there is a lack of men's space available. So there are homeless men and abused men who don't have spaces available. We are not against women's spaces. We're just saying there is a greater need for men's spaces than currently exist.
You guys are referring to violence like it belongs to men.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that I don't know how much we need male only spaces. Like, I don't think women pose a threat to men in the same way, but I want spaces and resources for everyone who needs it. Men, women, everybody. So if there is a lack of resources for men because there is so much spaces that are only reserved for women, I don't think we should be taking those women's spaces away. I just think that we should be adding more resources for everybody.
You guys are referring to violence like it belongs to men.
Most of it, especially serious violence, like most of the women that are getting killed through domestic violence, yes, they are.
Women are 1 out of 3 women in the U.S. were victim of domestic violence.
Do you have an experience to pull from that you want to share?
I've been hit by women before.
I've been stabbed.
Like, I've been hit multiple times by women. Yet, I'm a 225-pound guy of muscle and I have 20 years of experience. You know what I did? Nothing. I just took it. But if I were to go to the police, you know who they would remove from the house? Me. My ex-wife, when I was going through a divorce, told me that she lied to the police in order to file the divorce faster because it was taking too much time. Because where I'm from in Canada, it's 1 year. Like, they will tell you that you need to be separated for years so you have a chance to rekindle. But all I'm saying is violence, no matter. I'm not saying that men are not violent. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I've seen women as violent. It's just that it is not.
Pearl would say that men are not violent. I think she did. There was a whole prompt that they took out where she was saying stuff like that.
It is not regarded in the same way, just as you mentioned. No, but men are not taken seriously either. And the point I wanted to bring is to what you said, because you mentioned that earlier, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were saying that men are not encouraged to speak about their feelings.
I would say largely that's true, yeah.
Yet, you're bringing them down in your conversation. You're saying that being sexist towards a man is not as big of a deal as being towards a woman. So on one point, you're saying that men should be able to show their emotions, to live their emotions, however term you want to use. But in the next sentence, you're saying that the emotion of a man don't matter as much.
No, their emotions certainly matter. And I think that you can express like disagreement or even sadness if somebody's being quote unquote misandry. I'm just saying it's not systemic. And that's a matter of fact. I'm saying the descriptive reality of what misandry is versus what misogyny is, it's not actually systemic.
Just
right? So I'm having a factual disagreement with what men quote unquote are expressing their feelings, which I don't think the majority of men or even a plurality of men are expressing those sorts of feelings, that misandry is like some big burden on them.
Why are more laws against men though? I mean, there's
Evan killed this point. Again, everyone on my side, every time they speak, they're killing it. It's not that misandry and domestic violence committed by women is okay or is not important. It's that it's not systemic and the consequences are not as lethal. And I don't get how these men, because they're always like, oh yeah, like men are clearly stronger than women, and woman on the front line, oh my god, a woman pilot, oh, can you imagine a woman firefighter? But then they're like, no, domestic violence committed by women against men is just as lethal and just as consequential, and we need shelters for these men, and blah blah blah. Like, it just doesn't make sense, right? And like, according to the UN, the number of men killed by domestic violence is astronomically lower, and the domestic homicide rate of men, a lot of those deaths are perpetrated by another man, whether it's their partner or a family member, etc. We just don't have women killing men at the rates of men killing women. And that's just, I don't know why these people like to pretend that's not the case.
to men than women. Why is that?
Like which laws? Like the inconsequential draft?
No.
Like what laws?
Access to certain healthcare programs. Prostate cancer, the biggest killer of non-smoking men, is not covered under the ACA.
Okay, women in like half the country don't even have a right to like bodily autonomy, don't have access to effective contraception. You're comparing amount of rights.
You compare them. Wait, you compare those.
No, you literally just said men don't have more rights than women. You said that men have less rights. And when I asked you for an example,
there's no women's.
Oh, you said access. You said access to spaces.
Certain welfare programs.
Well,
yes.
No, so men don't have access to male-only spaces, but men do have access to, and I do believe in a strong social safety net. But there's not male-exclusive spaces because there's not gendered violence of women against men to the same degree that there is in their.
That is just not. That is false.
In terms of legitimate safety, in terms of like risk.
One out of 3 will face domestic violence. 1 out of 4 men face the same violence.
But I don't think that it's some like widespread systemic issue or that it's the issue that men like necessarily need. Or I think that if you had co-ed spaces, I don't see why a co-ed space would be detrimental to men. Whereas I do see co-ed spaces can be detrimental to women and the need for women-only spaces.
But do you think that male victims face certain stigmas and stereotypes?
I do believe that we need to destigmatize the way that men experience victimhood. A lot of men believe that it's demasculating to ask for help, and that is something that as a feminist I push up against. I also think it's wrong to consider a man less of a man based on like how much he earns. I do believe that we should encourage men to like share their feelings.
What I find ironic in your statements is that you're literally saying that men's feelings don't matter as much.
No, what?
You were talking about sexism earlier. This is literally what.
See, I just feel like Nico is just so funny to me because I feel like he was just like in his own like world. Like, I don't know where he got that.
Literally what you said.
I'm just giving you a descriptive reality of why male-only spaces don't exist. I don't think that it would be like the most intrinsic evil in the world if a male-only space existed, but it's not a like necessary part of the way that sexual or gender-based violence is experienced by men.
Since I have been a kid, it has been common in the media to refer to men as trash, to say that men are the problem, men are terrible, etc., to the point that on national TV, a guy got his chopped off and they were laughing about it, and nobody said anything and nobody cared. And if the reverse happened, I don't think it would be the same outrage.
Does anyone on this side want to Do you see that?
I agree.
happening?
That should be an outrage, and the reason why it isn't is because it's considered demasculating for men to be victims. And I think that in order to dismantle that, we should dismantle unhealthy views about masculinity, which is exactly what feminists are saying.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Women's sexual capital gives them an advantage over men.
Okay, so my position on this and the reason I didn't step forward was not that I don't agree that women's sexual capital gives them an advantage over men. I do think it does, but I do think that there's a flip side to that. And it's also the reason that women are so vilified. And I think if we looked at it overall, sex appeal hurts women just as much as it helps. And I actually think that when women choose to openly capitalize off of it, like women like me that do OnlyFans and girls that do it successfully, society is almost like itching to have us face consequences for that and pay for it like somehow or end up miserable.
I do think women can capitalize off of their sexual power, but I also think they're also demonized and vilified. And even when they aren't trying to capitalize off of it, people still see them as just that.
We also see cases of like porn stars dying. There's a lot of, I feel like a lot of men like to Google at women, like to see them, objectify them, but they don't see them as human. So I don't know, so women might capitalize off of that, but I don't necessarily see that as like net positive for them if they're being vilified for doing something that obviously has a market for it. I just think it's very hypocritical.
Why do you find it hypocritical?
Because there are men that literally watch this content, that subscribe to these people, and then they demonize the same people they're giving money to.
24/7.
Yeah, this is a man's problem, not a woman's problem. Men need to control themselves.
And I think if women have a ton of sexual capital, who gave it to us? It's not us. We're not the ones that are just deciding, I'm going to be powerful because I have a body. That's not what's happening. It's men that never learned how to deal with their emotions and their feelings and their urges. That wasn't taught to them.
Yeah, that was kind of my point. I don't see it, like if we're looking overall, it's not a net positive when we're looking at women as a whole. For me, it's a net positive, but I'm looking at women generally.
That wasn't taught to them, so they don't know how to do that. So now they give women all this sexual capital and then also want to vilify us for it and make us the bad guy for it. But you're the one that's noticing the pretty girls. You're the one that's giving us this. I didn't ask for. It's funny because when I'll go with my boyfriend, sometimes I'll go places and I get 5 chicken tenders instead of 4. Or, you know, we go on, yeah, I get 2 drinks. And I come home and I'm like, oh, look what I got. And he's like, that never happens to me. And I'm like, oh, silly. I'm asking for it.
I guess a follow-up, though, that what they might ask or that I'm curious about is, do you think there's like that's just a sort of natural pattern or order to how men and women operate, or do you feel like that's conditioned?
I think it's conditioned because it is so refreshing and welcome and amazing when I meet a man who does not treat me that way. They do not treat me like a sexual object. They treat me like a person. They talk to me like a person. They give me what I paid for. I get my item and I leave. And there's no weird like, did I owe him anything? Did he?
Can I respond to that? In my personal experience, men only talk to women they want to sleep with.
Yeah.
In my personal experience, women have to be attractive on top of their job. You can't just be a lawyer, you have to be an attractive lawyer. You can't just be a dentist, you have to be an attractive dentist. I think when men talk about sexual capital in women, it's because they literally ignore every other woman in that area.
There's like this concept of like men get put in a friend zone, women get put in a zone.
So do you think that, some of what I heard is it is what it is. Men are attracted to beautiful women. So there's kind of a natural order argument. This is just the way we behave, whether it's biologically, or do you feel that it's conditioned?
I do think it's conditioned.
Can I respond to that? I think it's a little both. I do think that is a little bit of the natural order of things, but like for instance, I think a big, like my only really interaction with these man spaces or the manosphere spaces are these like red pill podcasts that I've gone on a million times, like Fresh and Fit, whatever, where they bring on women like me that are making all this, oh, you're on OnlyFans. They bring in all these sex workers and then they tell us we're low value, nobody will ever love us, we're for the streets, and they do all of that, and then my comments get flooded with that. That's conditioned. That is conditioned.
I say MRA, Fresh and Fit.
Okay, so yeah, I do think that it's the natural order of things, but I think it's men who are angry at this. Like men are mad that we benefit from them lusting over us. And with the proliferation of OnlyFans came these angry male podcasts that want to put us down for it, right? Yeah.
Fresh and Fit really sucks.
It does, 100%. Yeah,
I do not like them. They're trash. They're garbage. They're from South Florida, unfortunately. I don't like them.
But why do OnlyFans? And then go on the whatever podcast.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's because the same men, their audience that hates us, they're also making me a shit ton of money.
Exactly. Like you're pretty much a prop for them to make money because they'll have you on the podcast and you'll be like the eye candy, but they won't actually.
I always say these podcasts though are like our sponsors. They're like our advertisers. They're our brand deals. And I know that they've been dying off and it's kind of sad for that reason, but it's overall good.
I could feed into their audience.
People don't respect sex workers because it's easy to take your clothes off. That's why they don't respect them.
It's also easy to open
people respect things that are hard. And sex work, OnlyFans, that's not hard.
And why is it that people still respect like Leonardo DiCaprio sleeping with small? It's really easy for him to do that. Nobody bats an eye.
For him sleeping with who?
With younger women. When extremely rich and wealthy,
I don't think
successful
that's
men.
common.
Wait, when extremely rich,
do
successful, healthy, and good-looking men sleep with a lot of women, even though it's easy for them to do so, they're not looked down on the same way that, like for example, a sex worker may be using her body. It's also important to note that like this whole idea of like sex workers and OnlyFans girls.
Okay, I feel like this argument that people hate OnlyFans because it's easy doesn't make sense for a multitude of reasons. Number one, it's not easy. If it was, then everybody could do it and become very successful at it. And there's only a few women who are able to do that. And a lot of that has to do with marketing and a multitude of other things. But number two, since when do we hate people? Like hate people because their jobs are easy? Like, do we hate parking lot attendants? Do we hate lottery winners? Do we hate people who inherit money from their parents and, you know, buy gas stations or whatever? Like, OnlyFans women, like, we're not asking for people to treat us like Nobel Peace Prize winners, but you vilify us and you hate us. And then it's because you have no way to justify that hateful feeling in your chest that you have because you don't like women being in control of their sexuality and profiting off of it. You have to come up with something, and you can't even come up with something good. It's just like, oh, no, we hate you because your life is easy. But then again, these are the same people who don't hate billionaires or people whose lives are actually very, like, exceptionally easy.
OnlyFans girls like making a ton of money is extremely new. Who owns like 99% of the actual porn industry in the production studios? It's men. Men historically
and no one cared. They didn't hate those men before.
Even today, still are the ultimate benefactors of women's sexuality.
And men only started getting upset about porn and all this stuff when women started making their own money on OnlyFans. Men did not complain about porn before the proliferation of OnlyFans. These podcasts did not exist back then.
100%.
Was it difficult for Leonardo DiCaprio to become rich and successful? Is that a difficult thing to do?
In his case, maybe, but for a lot of men, not necessarily.
To be a world-renowned.
Do you think it?
Could you just answer yes or no? Is that hard to do?
I don't. That's a vague ass question.
It's also really weird because a lot of the things that like even being an athlete or even being a great actor, like some of that is just natural ability. Like some of that, like no matter how hard I work, I will never be a great actor. I'll never be a great ball player. So these people do have like some attributes that they didn't earn, and then they use those attributes into something and turn it into something profitable or turn it into something great, which a lot of OnlyFans girls do as well, right? They take something they naturally have, which is sex appeal, and then they market it, right? A lot, like OnlyFans doesn't have an internal marketing system. People have to market themselves outside of OnlyFans, and people do that most successfully by becoming internet personalities, YouTubers, Twitch streamers. It's really the same thing as becoming a prominent like YouTuber or something. Like you have to appeal to an audience.
Are men who were born into wealth and naturally good looking, when they sleep with a lot of women, are they demonized for that and called sluts?
No.
No. So it doesn't matter whether or not it was difficult for them to get to a high status or if they were just born into it.
I would
Being
say,
a man doesn't preclude
they're not
that type of
demonized. They're not
discrimination.
demonized, but it's generally difficult for men to be selected by a lot of women, and the dating app stats will back that up.
That's not
so
my
again,
question,
I know you're asking about demonization.
Dating app stats do not back this up. I did a video on hookup culture recently. I will put it somewhere on the screen. And I go over in that video how dating app data does not actually map out onto actual dating practices and actual like hookups and relationships.
But the original question was, why does Leonardo DiCaprio celebrate it? It's because it is hard. Being a sex worker is easy.
You just said he celebrated because it's hard, but you just admitted
People
earlier.
celebrate
You
hard
just
things.
also admitted earlier that a guy who is successful and born into wealth and born into a naturally good-looking body is also celebrated for sleeping a lot.
That's
of women.
not really that.
So it's not actually contingent on whether or not
I'll make a caveat. I would say even men still need to learn to be attractive to women, even if they're born into wealth and naturally good looking.
Women also need to learn how to be attracted to men.
That's fine.
Are you calling this just dumb blogs or something?
But some of the top OnlyFans.
And honestly, like I said, when I look at women like more successful than me in this industry, a lot of them have fucking star power. Like they're really good at making viral content. They're really like being like, their content is just so good. And it's not until you start trying to make content that you can like spot really like people who really can connect with their audience and make content that people want to watch and people look forward to seeing, or every time they pop up on my For You page, I want to click on it. It is like becoming like a lot of people can start YouTube channels, and some people are more successful than others. What ingredients do those people have? And part of it is hard work, and part of it is consistency, and those things that also make you successful on OnlyFans.
Say being a sex worker is easy, but look at I know you love statistics. How come most OnlyFans women don't earn a living?
Because they don't care about money. They like attention. And that was the big thing when I interviewed off of interviewing a bunch of OnlyFans models, and they'll tell you that. A lot of them do. They say, I just enjoy taking off my clothes on camera.
Well, let's hear from somebody who has experience. Do you want to respond to that?
That's absolutely not true. I mean, just to use my anecdotal experience, I didn't even have social media before I started OnlyFans. I didn't have an Instagram. I do not care about attention. I just wanted to make a lot of money, which is why people do OnlyFans. Why would they want to get attention? A lot of it's negative, too. A lot of people hate you. A lot of people think no one's going to marry you, blah, blah, blah. I don't believe those things, but I'm also able to advocate for, I'm a lawyer, so I'm more gifted in being able to combat that rhetoric. These girls are not. And a lot of these girls that are going into this, I'm the exception. They don't have other options. They're not super educated. They don't have other avenues to try to make a living. And then a lot of them, when they do go in this, when you say it's easy, it's not easy to make a ton of money on OnlyFans. I had to do a ton of marketing. I had no social media following ahead of it. You could say, okay, well, you look a certain way or whatever, but a lot of the women that enter this, if it was so easy, they wouldn't be not making money.
Well, I would disagree that there's no other option. You guys can get jobs just like the men. And number two, I look at what people say versus what they do. You might say that you didn't care about attention, but I look at the way you behave and dress, and it would indicate otherwise.
That's not the real job to you, Pearl.
And you're more scantily clad. Okay. So why? What are you looking for? Attention?
Yeah, why is she dressed like that? I'm like literally head to toe covered, and she comes in like a super, super short dress, which she does frequently, which I don't understand why. If the way you're dressed speaks to how much attention you want, then the way she's dressed means she wants more attention than I do. I usually come on to promote my OnlyFans, and I do come in like cleavaged out sometimes. Other times I just come in like a tight dress. Like I just wear what I want. Pearl's the one who seems to dress because she's looking for some type of attention or validation.
Feminism is trying to remove masculinity from society.
What's too vague? I mean, do feminists want to erase masculinity? It's kind of too abstract and vague to answer. So my problem is when feminists try and redefine masculinity, where they try and say this is our interpretation of toxic masculinity as we see it. That's kind of the problem that I have. I don't like it when feminists tell men how they should feel, how they're supposed to feel. This is how your experience as a man is supposed to go. And that is where I would have the issue with that.
I would say that, yeah, so people say, oh, masculine, like men are all supposed to be masculine and women are always supposed to be feminine, as if there's no overlap. While there may be differences between men and women are average, a lot of times those effect sizes are pretty small. And to have a society where we have this rigid, like, you're a woman, therefore this is the best job for you. You're a man, so this is the best job for you. That's not how you have a flourishing society actually based on meritocracy, where the people best suited for a particular role or a particular job or more passionate about it can go do that. So if women want to be at home, they can. If they don't have to. Same for men.
Also, many people also have a mix of femininity and masculinity.
Yeah, can I expand on that actually?
Go ahead.
In my experience,
Okay, yeah, like this whole masculinity and femininity and masculine and feminine traits, whenever I look at a chart of these traits, because I usually don't know what the fuck they're talking about, so I pull up like a chart, and I usually am like, I want both of them. Like, I want them all. Like, it'll be like, men are good at problem solving and women are more intuitive. Women are nurturing and men are like, I want all of it. Like, I don't care if they're masculine or feminine. I want every good trait and not negative traits. That's it. I don't care.
Children, as I'm bringing independent thinking little humans into this world, and I want them to grow into whoever they are meant to be, whatever that is, whether it's a male ballerina or a female NFL coach. I want this little person that I love so much to be whatever they want to be.
But no one's arguing with that.
Okay, so here's what I think. I agree that people should not be locked into a role either way. I think that if you took 10 million men and 10 million women and you tracked them over 10 years, you might see certain trends emerge. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be this or you have to be that. People should be free to be whatever they want. But I do think that you would see certain trends emerge. Now,
what might some of those be?
Well, you might see on average boys are more likely to play with G.I. Joes and girls are more likely to play with Barbies.
Okay, so these are straight statistics coming straight out of his, like, whatever.
I don't disagree with Thomas here. I think that this is partially socially constructed, but that there could be innate differences on average too. I just don't think that that matters. Like, I think as long as we're in a society where individuals can be individuals, I don't care about what trends emerge. I just want to get rid of social pressures and then see what people actually want to do. And if it does turn out that there are more women that want to do certain roles and more men that want to do others, I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah, we cannot go off of like statistics and a number that you're coming up with on the fly.
You make a good point. I feel like you're talking about social conditioning.
You're saying you assume there would be trends if you ran that study.
Yes.
That's his assumption.
Yes.
It's not an actual stat. But does anybody on the feminist side do you believe that masculinity is a thing?
Well, I mean, it's a thing in the way that race is also a thing. It's not biological, it's not fixed, but it's a real social construct that does have real impacts on people's everyday lives. And I understand what you're saying, that there are going to be deviations and differences, and the test is whether or not those deviations are socially constructed, environmental, or biologically based. But I think that we have no clue to the extent that things are truly socially constructed. For millennia, women have been barred out of like educational purposes, but now women are actually out graduating men. They're actually earning better grades than men in many instances.
You have nothing of a point to say.
I would agree. I think it's a mixture of...
That's just not true.
I think it's a mixture of biology and conditioning. So it's interesting to imagine 100 years from now, how will it play out? But I do think it's a mixture of both, so I do agree with that.
That's nature versus nurture. We've known that. We've understood that. That's nothing like mind-blowing at you.
You said you were the most masculine person here. Can you define what masculinity is?
Exactly.
I would like to hear that.
5 things. A man's a provider. He needs to be a protector. Of course. He needs to have faith. He needs to have courage.
You got it. So if they don't do that, they're not masculine by your definition.
Yeah, why is faith masculine?
You have to believe.
I don't know. Nico is so funny to me.
Okay, to answer your question, I'll ask you a question. How do you build self-confidence?
You don't need faith to do that.
You don't need faith to do that. No, you don't.
Oh, hold on. You're assuming that faith, I'm talking about God.
Don't assume what I'm assuming.
No, but faith in yourself. Your self-belief starts with believing in yourself. That's faith. Because at the beginning, you won't believe.
Why is that masculine, though? Anybody can have that.
Do you think that there's masculinity?
No, it's not a real concept. Femininity is not a real concept.
Aren't you a men's rights activist?
Oh, men's rights.
Oh my God. Okay. Next prompt.
Andrew Tate is having a positive influence on society.
The only one who really seemed to adamantly believe this was Pearl, obviously.
Okay, well, I say screw Andrew Tate. He's horrible. I'm part of several MRA spaces, and we denounce him completely.
Yeah.
I've seen his video of his so-called boot camp for men, where he just basically bullies men.
So dumb.
I'm not saying he doesn't have any good points ever, but for the most part, he's everything the men's rights movement should not be like, and I don't think he's a good MRA.
Can I also add to that? I feel like men's rights activists, we have a problem with grifters on our side. People who, like you mentioned earlier, you understand social media, they target young men.
Yeah, they target young people in general.
Yeah,
Andrew Tate's not men. It's not men for young.
I get that.
You don't think Andrew Tate's an MRA?
Hold on. Let me finish my thought. What I'm saying, though, is the guy's a grifter. He sells people. The problem with MRA activists in general is there's real problems affecting men. And Andrew Tate will talk about that, but then he'll try to sell you on a course afterwards.
I agree with that.
And that's the problem is a lot of people on this side take advantage of young men because we're so starved to be safe, seen, and heard that we'll take anybody.
But I will say one thing, though. Andrew Tate is a symptom. You do have to.
He's a symptom.
Why did he get popular?
No,
there has to be some reason why these young men felt and moved from somewhere.
It's the same thing. I was going to say just real quick. There's an overlap between like what's called Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate's audience, and there's an overlap between Hassan Piker and FD Signifier's audience. There are positive examples of masculinity who will tell you the same things: work hard and work on yourself. There's an overlap. The only problem is that men are just so starved for just somebody recognizing their emotions that they'll just take anybody.
And they see someone like Andrew Tate as, hey, at least he's fighting back.
Exactly.
At least he's fighting back.
They don't realize they're being taken advantage. Exactly. Yeah.
Would you consider him an MRA?
No.
I wouldn't have considered him.
I don't consider him that, but he does talk about men's issues.
Pulls from the same manosphere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And MRAs oftentimes have a
He's someone I would want to see.
Well, I would have called him like a
not
success. I call him like success.
I call him a misogynist.
I call him a human trafficker.
Yeah,
I call him criminal.
You mentioned that it may be more of an issue with delivery, but he said explicit things whereas like he doesn't take the opinions of women seriously. There's no way of delivering that kind of message. Like the issue isn't with the delivery, it's the content of that. And then additionally, I would just say any individual who is a human sex trafficker, which if you listen to the videos in which he explains how he runs his business model, it is exactly that, stealing from sex workers and lying to
exploiting poor women,
lying to them about what he's paying them and how much is going towards taxes and fees, etc. Any sort of model like that, regardless of what they're saying, is not a net positive impact on men, and in fact reinforces the same kind of sexist, misogynistic things that men need to get over.
And he's also admitted to literally robbing men, taking their money because he tricked them into thinking they were talking with actual women behind cameras. He said this himself. I'm not making that up.
Yeah. I'm not debating you guys at all. I said this. I said that there's a lot of things that he's done I don't agree with either. But to say that everything he has done is negative, I could say that from anybody.
The question is, Andrew Tate has had a positive influence on society. And so, Nico, what I'm asking you is, you're saying you don't agree with everything Andrew Tate does. And we're hearing, there's things that he's explicitly said he's done that it seems like everybody here would.
Nico is just so funny. He's like, oh, I thought the prompt was like, he's never, ever said anything correct.
Is wrong. But do you think the positive outweighs that negative?
I'd have to split it down the middle like any choices that I make in life and say a win and a lose column and weigh the result.
I have a friend who he's out here in California. He's got like 8 months to live from brain cancer, and his wife is paralyzed. So he basically got this diagnosis and he found out he had 8 months to live. I was raising money for him, and the Tates donated like $15,000 to him and his wife. They don't even know him. And so it's like, even just like personally, I don't know them well, I've just met them once, but
You're friends with them.
Okay, wait a minute. If an OnlyFans girl did this, which they have, there's stories of like OnlyFans girls donating significant amounts of money to GoFundMes, etc. Would she feel the same way about them? I don't know what point that's trying to make.
Oh, but she's saying
I only met them once. I've literally met them once.
And John Wayne Gacy was a kid's clown at kids' parties. So really ugly people can still do really generous things in the world. So that does not make him a good person. A broken clock can be right twice a day. Yeah. Doesn't make it a clock that you want to follow.
I love
give someone like Andrew Tate that
every
such a disgusting message that disparages so many people in the world, and he treats people so horribly. He should not have any sort of platform, because not only is he not making the world positive, he is making the world a much, much uglier place, starting with our youth and little boys that we're trying to raise to have feelings and to be decent, contributing members of society. Tate is getting in their heads.
Since I do OnlyFans, I make it a point I do not use chatters. If someone's paying to talk to me, I will not defraud them and have some person in Bangladesh pretend to be me as a guy and talk to them. Andrew Tate had no problem scamming any of these men. I have more respect for men than Andrew Tate does. Not even just women. For men, I would never scam a man. Whereas Andrew Tate was just like, oh, these losers, I'm just going to make them think they're talking to this girl and find a way to emotionally manipulate men, emotionally manipulate vulnerable men into giving these women this money that then he's just taking.
Exactly. Like, what are you doing? He makes fun of men for being broke. He makes fun of men for not having, a bunch of women. He hates men. He's the worst male advocate you could ever have.
Like he's a grifter.
The men's rights movement is not as important as the feminist movement.
Most of us, except maybe Pearl, have denounced podcasts like Fresh and Fit, but they literally say #1's men's podcast. So how much of these spaces are actually filled with that toxicity? And I mean, the definition of feminism that's most pervasive is the social, political, and economic equality between the sexes. So I think real feminists are not the ones perpetuating those negative stereotypes of, oh, men need to be like this, men need to be providers. You're not a man if you can't do this. You're not a man if you can do that. And so I think that real feminism kind of eliminates the need for that, for men's rights, because we just want everybody to be treated as individuals instead of, treating them differently based on their gender.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people conflate feminism and misandry.
So my final thought is, as a woman, we have the right to do whatever we want. And I don't know what really feminists are crying about. We can go get an abortion if we want one. We can go get birth control. We can go work. I can't think of anything we can't do. So to me, feminism is just a lot of crying and whining over nothing.
It's funny because I actually, like, most of my life, someone said, are you a feminist? I would be like, yeah, but I didn't really have to get, like, adamant about it until I switched my career into doing OnlyFans and was constantly attacked by, again, I'm not used to it. I love, like, the two of you and what you do, because I do think that there needs to be a space for actual men like Hassan, like you, who are giving a positive example of masculinity. Okay, well, whatever. I don't watch it. But no, a narrow, distorted view of masculinity. And I feel like I almost had to become a feminist in opposition to so much toxicity. And it is, unfortunately, the case that the big names are the ones that are having the most impact. I would love for you guys to be able to get more of these young men away from Sneeko, away from Fresh and Fit, away from Andrew Tate. But the unfortunate truth is whatever they're spewing out to these kids is more popular. And because of that, then people like me, I was like, okay, all these girls are going on these podcasts and they're just being, like, shitted on because they don't have the verbal ability or maybe, like, the ability I have to combat the rhetoric. So I had to almost, now everyone's like, oh my God, you're such a big feminist, but it's because I had to do it in opposition to a men's rights movement that came about to basically shit on us.
A men's right activist movement that doesn't care about men, mind you. You guys care about men. I can tell y'all care about men.
All right, thank you all for participating in this discussion. I know it's hard. I got it.
All right, guys, let me know what you think of this episode. Leave your comments below. I will be reading them. I will be responding to them, and I will see you next time. Bye.
I don't know the airport.